Hi everybody. We are embarking on a slightly different type of quadratic at this point. You have been introduced to factored form, that's what we started with. You've been introduced to standard form, and now we're going to get into something called the vertex form. However, there are a lot of pieces to the vertex form, so we're going to kind of break it apart and look at specific things. So before we get too deep into things, this is what the vertex form looks like. Now, we've seen A before, okay? But H and K are new. Today we're going to investigate the properties of A. If you haven't already, you might want to look at, grab yourself, get the website Desmos and do this stuff in the background, or you can just follow along. So the king parabola, the most basic parabola, y equals x squared, and that's what's shown here, y equals x squared. So the challenge that I'm giving you is make the parabola skinnier. So if this is the king parabola, I want you to make me a parabola that fits inside the king parabola. All right, take a second, take a guess, think about it, and let's move on. So what has to happen is A has to be greater than 1. Okay, now what these lines means is absolute value, so you're in luck, we can ignore the signs. As long as the number is bigger than 1, then it will be stretched. So the term for this is just that, stretching. Um, yeah, and it doesn't matter what number it is as long as it's bigger than 1. So we looked at how to make it skinnier. How are we going to make it fatter? So now we're trying to make it do this. What do we have to change about A to make that happen? Again, flip over to Desmos, think about it for a second, or just follow along on the next slide. So the proper mathematical terminology is that A is greater than -1, but less than -1, A cannot equal 0. For you guys, it's you guys are going to think of it as A is a decimal. And while this isn't accurate, I've just dealt with students long enough that I know that this is how they think. The reason, as soon as I say A is a decimal, you're thinking 0.75, -1, 0.2, something along those lines. The reason this isn't accurate, this isn't acceptable, is because 3.4 is also a decimal, but that stretches, it doesn't compress. Now, how I remember this terminology is when you squish a marshmallow, it makes everything else squish out. Uh, and I do apologize for the handwriting. It has gotten considerably better from when I first started doing this, but it is still not great. As always, I will go back and fix it in the PDF. All right. Now, what I want is for you to make the parabola open down. Now, this is a characteristic that we looked at way back in the beginning. Back when I first introduced parabolas to you, in fact, it was one of the first things that we introduced. So you probably know the answer to this off the top of your head, but if not, go and see if you can make it happen. Now, the proper terminology for this is its reflection in the x-axis. Okay. A is less than 0, and that makes it open down. In other words, it's a positive A or a negative A, which is how most normal human beings think about it, assuming, of course, we have accepted integers into our lives. And all this does is it reflects it. It's a mirror. So we're going to introduce you to an early part, a new part, and it's describing the transformations. In this case, there are two transformations. Okay? It is reflected that's one. It's also stretched. Okay? And it's actually 3. And I know that because this is 1 and this is 3. Okay, so let's have a look, see how much you remember. Which of these parabolas open up? Up, down, up, up, down. And I know that by looking at the signs. Okay, if there's no sign, I can assume it's positive. And if there is a sign, if there's a negative sign, then it must be a negative. Now, going from narrowest to widest, here we're just looking at numbers. And when we're looking at just how wide or thin it is, we're ignoring signs. And seeing as how some of you have been doing that all the way through, you won't have to think about anything new. So this is narrowest. Actually, that is not the narrowest. That's the narrowest. That's the second narrowest. Third narrowest. And then we actually have a tie for fourth. Right? One's a positive 0.5, one's a negative 0.5, but they're still 0.5. So in summary, the human version is skinny, which means that our A value, the absolute value of A, meaning we ignore we're ignoring the signs, has to be bigger than 1. So for example, and the terminology is it's stretched. Now to make something fat or wider, A has to be between -1 and 1. And the terminology for this is compressed. Okay, it opens up. We don't usually say it opens up, but sometimes when I specifically ask you which way is it opening, you're going to have to define that. Usually it's just a normal parabola. A is greater than 1. So really, again, as long as it's a positive number. And there is no real terminology to this. Like I said, usually we just assume it opens up, so we just say it's opening up. The one that we do specify is that it opens down. Actually, that's wrong. 0 and 0. So it's got to be a positive value. It's got to be a negative value. Y equals -27. And that's all we have to change. We just have to change it to a negative value. So the proper terminology when it opens down is that it's reflected in the x-axis. That's it. Have a look in your textbooks, page 178. Only do the select questions because we'll come back for some of the other ones tomorrow. Your textbook is a little odd. I'm sure you'll all do brilliantly. Get her done.